Good evening and welcome to Open Mind Special. And we do have a very, very special show this evening where my guest, Adam Stokes, is going to do a presentation. Welcome to the show, first of all, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
And you're welcome. And you're in your class?
Yes, over at Penns Grove High School. Yep, in South Jersey.
Is that where you teach?
This is where I teach Latin. I have some of my Latin stuff back here. I don't know if you can see it. My gladiator poster, and then below me are all my standard boring Latin textbooks that I have the students that have the students suffer through.
I was going to say that. But before we get going, I've got a bio to read out. You know me with my auto cues, professional here. So Adam Oliver Stokes holds a degree in religion from Duke University and Yale Divinity School. His interests as a researcher include Old Testament history, Mormon studies, and ancient American history, with a particular focus on the lost giants of pre-Columbia, one of my favorite topics. Of America. He is the author of From Egypt to Ohio, a Semitic Origin for the Giants of North America and the Latin Scrolls. Selections from Five Megilloth translated, Five Megilloth, is it Megilloth?
Megilloth, but some people say Megilloth.
Okay, I'm British, I can get away with it. Scrolls. Translated from the Latin Vulgate. His work has been featured in numerous journals and magazines. Oh, doing it again. And he has been a frequent guest on various podcasts on my inception. He currently teaches Old Testament at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, as well as Latin and mythology at Penns Grove High School in New Jersey. You know, whenever I have to read something, I mess it up big time. When I'm talking, I just don't like being too professional. But on that note, I am going to mute, guys. You're going to love that. But we will have a conversation afterwards. And we're calling this evening's show When Giants Walked Amongst Us, or we may come up with another title. Please pay attention. Adam's gone to a lot of effort to put this together and to share his interest with us. So on that note, I hand it over to you.
Sounds good, Gloria. All right, let me put this up here on the beginning slide. Technology and me never got along, but hopefully this will be better. All right. Let me see if I can actually show the slides for this. How is that? Good, awesome, all right. So I'm going to talk today about, give a little bit of an overview of something I could talk about forever and ever, about the lost giant civilization of North America, which they don't really teach you about in mainstream textbooks, but there have been a lot of researchers in the past 10, 15 years, Hugh Newman, Jim Vieira, Richard Dewhurst, and even myself, that are trying to bring this to light and really show that ancient America, pre-Columbia, Columbian North America was much different than what you've traditionally been taught in high schools and in college. But with that said, I'll start off where your standard textbooks start off, always with the European settlement, as if there was no history thousands of years before then. But I'll use this kind of as a segue to talk about the giant. So when Europeans came here, beginning in the 16th century, they encountered Native Americans, and they encountered all throughout, as they continued their travels, they encountered hundreds of earthworks and mounds. Some estimates, depending on the primary source literature that you read, say thousands of mounds. We know that up until the 19th century, at least hundreds of mounds existed. And then through settlement and building projects. A lot of them were unfortunately destroyed, so we only have a couple hundred now, but these were found all over, especially in the Midwest area. And so when Europeans found these, they were interested in learning more about them. And as they got a rapport with the Native Americans, they learned that these mounds were built by an ancient race of giants that the Native Americans themselves simply referred to as the mound builders. Now, I should note that not all of the mounds that they found were built by the mound builders. Some of the mounds, in fact, several of them were imitations of the mounds of the ancient mound builders made by the Native Americans at the time, or they were places that the mound builders had built up, but then Native Americans settled with them, settled in these areas, and built other mounds around them. So not all mounds are the same. So this is a question I get. They're like, well, you know, if every mound's the same, then you should have giants in all of these mounds, giant skeletal remains. But some mounds, you have to remember, are made in imitation of these earlier mounds. But the Native Americans, they didn't really have a name for these people other than the mound builders. And they were, according to Native American tradition, this great elaborate civilization that intermingled with the Native Americans. So a lot of, sometimes you get pushback where people will say, oh, you're trying to kind of diminish Native Americans while focusing on these mound builders. No, the Native Americans are descendants of these mound builders. They have their blood in them, but the mound builders themselves and the Native Americans claim that they were not indigenous originally to the region, but came from someplace else. So that's something I always like to point out. In addition to this, something I find most interesting, Greg Little and Andrew Collins talk about this in their book, Denisovan Origins, is that European settlers actually at times encounter the descendants of these giants and giants themselves among the Native American population. So there's a very famous picture where there's a sketch that's made by a European colonist of these giants that he encounters, clearly people who are 7 to 8 feet in height. And he drew a picture of it. And later on, it's really funny, the Smithsonian gets this picture and they say, well, this dude is basically elaborating, kind of exaggerating about what he's describing. So they take a pencil and they reduce the height of the figures in this sketch. But the original sketch showed these giant individuals. So this is very interesting because one, it shows that the giants retained their lineage, even though their civilization died out, their lineage was retained amongst the Native American population, and some of them seem to have survived and still existed by the 16th and 17th centuries when Europeans are coming in vast to the New World. So very interesting there, and something that's not often talked about. All right, so let's skip ahead. Started in the 16th century. Let's move on to the 19th century, where things really start to get on the ground. And this is a time, 19th century is just undoubtedly the golden age of archaeology in so many fields, Egyptology, biblical studies, and even Native American civilization, ancient American civilization. So it's during this time, before this time, people are noticing these mounds, but they don't really do anything. The notable exception is Thomas Jefferson, yes, our president. He actually excavated, one of our founding fathers, he actually excavated a mound and found some remains in there, but nobody really touches these things until the mid-19th century, when people start to, basically you have the manifest destiny, people are going out west, and they start claiming property, basically stealing it from the Native Americans, but they're claiming property. They find these mounds in their land, and so they're like, this is our land. So they start digging through these mounds, and they find the remains, the skeletal remains of persons of extraordinary stature. So ranging between 7 to 9 feet, some as elaborate as 12 feet. So they continue to find these remains. Now, this is interesting because these people are not being cremated This shows that there's no cremation as you sometimes get in Native American tradition. So this is kind of a different cultural tradition that we're getting here, very similar to, and I'll get some pushback from this from my Egyptologist friend, excuse me, very similar to the type of burial that you have with the Egyptian pharaohs and queens, buried separately with their servants, with their jewelry, stuff like that. So very, very similar there, and suggesting kind of an origin someplace else, which I'll get to shortly. Now, one of the things I often want to point out, so a lot of critics will say this giant thing in the 19th century was a hoax, but there's actually a Instagram site, Giants of North America, and the person there, shout out to him, has a listing of thousands and thousands and thousands of newspaper clippings and articles from the mid-19th century all the way up to the early 20th century of these finds of giants. Now, we know that this kind of became a craze, and with every craze, there's kind of a hoax and an imitation. So when Star Wars came out, for example, you have all these other shows that came out, science fiction shows that were kind of lesser quality, but kind of capitalizing on that phase. I mentioned that to say that we have a similar thing going on with the giants here in North America. So some of these finds were hoaxes, people trying to capitalize on things. The problem is, and mainstream scholarship does this a lot, they took the one or two hoaxes and just blew those up out of proportion and said that all of these were hoaxes, but clearly they were not. We have sketches, we have pictorial evidence for these giant remains. So this was something I should add, this was something known not just in local newspapers throughout the United States, but in academic journals. Scientific American, for example, writes about the finds of these giant remains in these mounds, and so does actually the Smithsonian for a while, until, as we'll see, some things emerge that make them change their position. Which brings me to the Smithsonian Cover-Up. I was actually here a couple years ago with my wife and kids. We had a great time. If you ever get the chance to go to Washington, D.C., I'd highly recommend it. The Smithsonian, like a lot of things in American history, it has a complicated past. The person that is most interesting here for what we are looking at is a guy named John Wesley Powell. He was a geologist, and he becomes the director of the Bureau of Ethnology for the Smithsonian in the mid-19th century. And he is from, so two things about him that are very important that are going to kind of shape how the Smithsonian views these mounds. So he's from the same area as Joseph Smith. Now, I mentioned on the last podcast with Gloria that my background is as a Latter-day Saint. And so he's from the same area of New York as Joseph Smith. And this is kind of where the area where Mormonism starts. But he's part of a different faith. I can't remember if he's Presbyterian or Methodist. So there's kind of a religious agenda to kind of disprove this other, this new religious movement that is rising up, Mormonism, which claims that there was an advanced ancient civilization here in North America. Secondly, remember the Smithsonian is a government institution, and this is, again, like I said, the time of manifest destiny. So people are moving out west, and they really need, it's not enough to just take the Indians' land. They need a moral justification for doing this. Whenever you oppress anybody, and we see this, with American slavery or with Jews in the Holocaust, you need some type of way to make the group you're oppressing be inferior to justify you oppressing them. And so what Powell does with the Native Americans, which is a great travesty and a great sin in my opinion, is that even though he knows better, he promotes his position of the Native Americans as barbaric. They're not completely savage, but they are less civilized, much less civilized than white Europeans. So basically, Powell is saying here that the Native Americans have no type of culture at all. They've never had really a high standing culture like the Romans or the Greeks or the Egyptians. But these are savages, and they need basically the civilization of the Europeans to improve themselves. So kind of a very racist ideology here. And this is going to undergird everything that the Smithsonian does. So if they see something that suggests that Native Americans are connected to an ancient advanced civilization, they're going to hush it up. So even though a lot of these excavations of these mounds initially are done by the Smithsonian, the late 18th century, Edward Squire, working for the Smithsonian, does an amazing cataloging of all these mounds. By the mid-19th century, that changes. So whatever evidence there is for giant remains or an advanced civilization, the Smithsonian suppresses that. They either have people send them remains where they miraculously disappear, or they say that these are all hoaxes and not worthy of investigation. Slip here. So a lot of this stuff, basically, even though people know about it, a lot of this stuff remains suppressed really up until, I would say, the late 20th century, where you have researchers working outside of mainstream academia who come back to this stuff and talk about the discoveries that people were making in the 19th century and early 20th century. Now, I want to talk some now about some of the Semitic features of the North American giants. So I've hinted throughout the PowerPoint that they came from somewhere else. Where exactly did they come from? Well, we have a lot of cultural evidence to suggest that they came from the Near East, from the Israel-Palestine area. We have these Semitic inscriptions from all over the country. This is the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, written in Paleo-Hebrew script, so before 538 BCE. This gives basically a summarized, paraphrased form of the Ten Commandments. So very, very interesting. So a Hebrew text, a central Hebrew text being found in New Mexico. And a lot of people have tried to say that it's a fraud. I actually wrote an article about this for Ancient American magazine. If you look at the Hebrew and the epigraphy, it has basically a type of grammar that you can date very well. It's very, very old Hebrew, because as languages go on, they retract and they get shorter. The words get shorter. This actually has kind of an elongated version of some of the words. For example, the Hebrew word face, paneha, instead of paneh, which you get in modern Hebrew, suggesting a really old date. And what is this doing in New Mexico? I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let me show you some more of these inscriptions and talk about what's going on here. So tablets and inscriptions were excavated along with these remains. Many times they were in the same area as these remains, so buried on the people or very close by them. And like I said, they give us a lot of insights into what this ancient giant empire was. Let me go back to this. This is Grave Creek. We found in West Virginia, and we found a stone, the Grave Creek stone, that appears to be in a form of Phoenician. I would say Paleo-Hebrew. Phoenician and Paleo-Hebrew are very similar to each other. But it was found here. And so a lot of these mounds, people find these tablets or stones with inscriptions. Let's share some of my favorites. So this is the Bat Creek stone found in Tennessee in 1889, and it contains a phrase in Paleo-Hebrew. So a lot of these, I keep saying Paleo-Hebrew, and that's significant because in the mid to late 19th century, when these things are being found, our knowledge of Hebrew is not that good. This is about 50 years before we'll find the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Ugaritic text. So people don't even know a lot of Paleo-Hebrew. The only Hebrew they'll know is the Aramaic script, excuse me, that Jews read in their synagogue. So that is what everybody would learn. The main grammar, in fact, for learning Hebrew, Brown Drivers Briggs, doesn't come out until 10 years after the Bat Creek Stone is found around 1899. So my point is that there are not a lot of people, unless you are really, really specialized, who would know Paleo-Hebrew, certainly not well enough to forge something like this. So this phrase here is very interesting. It reads Kadosh Ladonai, or holy to the Lord. So explicit reference, just like with the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, to the Hebrew God, to the God of the Old Testament. Again, suggesting a Semitic origin for these giants. All right. This past summer, I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, to the Putnam Museum there, and to look hands-on at the Davenport tablets. Often, just like as with the Michigan Relics that I'm gonna look at very shortly, dismissed as hoaxes and frauds, but containing a much more complicated history than that. Now we know, as with the giant remains, some people forged this stuff. So there's some Davenport tablets that look completely fake, and you know that they're fake. But there are others that are extremely, if on closer examination, are indeed authentic. And these plates were found throughout throughout the mounds in Davenport, Ohio, and in the surrounding area, so going into Iowa. And they seem to depict biblical imagery. So this one here that I have in the PowerPoint, this seems to show something called the Tree of Life. And these are found with a variety of other items. So one of the criticisms that people will have is that these tablets were buried, that people just inserted these tablets into these mounds. But no, a lot of these tablets were found in undisturbed regions, in undisturbed parts of the mound, and they were found not just by themselves, as you would expect if someone was doing a hoax, but they were found with other objects, pipes, clay figurines, etc., which leads to their authenticity. But most interesting that they depict biblical imagery from the Old Testament, again, suggesting a Semitic origin for whoever these giants were. All right, the last one, my favorite, I got to actually talk about these at the conference I went to in Ohio, are the Michigan Relics with the Michigan symbol. Hold on just a second. My apologies. One of the things about being in a high school, the marching band is actually practicing right outside my door. So you get to hear them. Actually pretty good. Anyway, I'm in love with these relics. I actually spent hours looking at them, got to hold a bunch of them, even with the Davenport relics as well. These were found from the early 1800s all the way through to the early 20th century. They were dismissed as hoaxes because a guy named Schofield in the late 19th century claimed to have found a bunch of them, and it turned out that he was kind of producing them himself. And so as mainstream academia does, they say that everything is a hoax, but the story is a little bit deeper than that. The Michigan Relics existed actually before Schofield was doing his forgeries. We know this from Native American traditions, even back as early as 1820, and they continue to be found not just in the area where Schofield is, but for at least 70 to 90 miles away. So if Schofield is forging all this stuff, he has to go a long way to do it. And other people are finding these type of tablets on their property. And they contain, it's really interesting, they contain a bunch of biblical imagery. So this one here on the PowerPoint is what looks to be the Noah's flood. I think it's actually a scene from the Book of Mormon, but we'll just say the consensus among researchers is that it's Noah's flood. And if you look at the top, there is on the right side of it something known as the mystic symbol, which is 3 lines with a dash, which seems to be synonymous with the divine name of God in Hebrew, Yod He Vav He, which in our traditional English Bibles, King James Version, gets translated as Jehovah. But you'll also see some symbols here. Some of these are Paleo-Hebrew, others of them are Greek. The eye over here is Egyptian, but very interesting. So suggesting that whatever this group was did not just have Israelite origin, but kind of merged with Egyptian culture as well, which kind of makes sense if you look at the history of the Israelite people and later the Jewish people. There's a lot of interaction with Egypt and Egyptian culture. In fact, once the first temple is destroyed, the Jews go into Egypt. They basically found a major community there, Alexandria, and the Greek Bible comes from this. So, but even before then, hundreds of years before then, the Egyptians and Israelites shared a lot of things. Their cultures intermixed a lot. We think of them as enemies because we watched Charlton Heston and the 10 Commandments, but they actually had a lot of things in common. So the tablets, inscriptions, and cultural features, i.e. the burial practices, they did not cremate, they buried, suggest, in my opinion, that these giants were from the Near East and likely Semitic in origin, a hybrid of Egyptian and Israelite, or Israelites who had inherited a lot of Egyptian culture. And there seem to have been multiple migrations for these giants. So a lot of them, the biggest empire, the Hopewell and the Adena cultures, that's not their actual name. Some guy named them those names afterwards. We only knew them as the mound builders from Native American tradition. But what modern academia refers to as the Hopewell and Adena seem to have settled in the Midwest region. But there seem to have been multiple migrations, even as far as into New Mexico, as we saw with the Los Lunas stone, probably over a very long course of time. So Edgar Casey talks about, migrations of the Israelites from 2000 BCE, even 3000 BCE, which would be really, really early. That's before, in mainstream biblical scholarship, before the time of the Davidic monarchy. But that seems to be verified with the remains that we have and the inscriptions that we have and the type of Hebrew that we have, which is very, very old. All right, so in closing, we know a couple of things. We know that there was a lost race of giants that once ruled an empire in North America. Their place, basically their capital, their central place of operation being in the Midwest, was the Ohio, Iowa, Michigan region. They were not indigenous to this land, but they came from the Near East, and they had advanced, sophisticated knowledge and technology, which is how I believe that they built these mounds. The mounds themselves, I mentioned this before, they just look like clumps of dirt as we see them now in the 21st century, but they were much more elaborate. Cities, walls, buildings were all around them. So much more elaborate, much more fancy, like the Egyptian pyramids. And I think that there's a direct connection there. And it's my contention that based on all this evidence, they were indeed related somehow to the Hebrews, Jews mentioned in the Old Testament. Of course, my tradition, the Latter-day Saint tradition, believes that a group of Hebrews came over to North America and settled here. So not interestingly, around the same exact time as mainstream scholars would date the rise and fall of the Hopewell and Adena civilizations. So that's basically all I have to say about that.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I'll wait till you remove that from the screen. And my gosh, that was so interesting. A lot of things were new to me. And first of all, the connection with the Hebrew. However, as you were going through that, and I kept thinking about the Egyptian connection, and then it's like, well, duh, as you know, the people from that part of the world started to migrate out and migrate the connection. And I thought, but one thing that really got me was obviously in Christian literature, it talks, well, the Bible specifically, of the giants that were on earth. So
Yes.
it's in there. Okay, it's in there. So I'm coming from what is the Christian perspective. So, but then when you think about that, and you found like this old Hebrew, the dialect at the time, the language at the time, then I never actually made that connection before. I had no idea who the giants were. We spoke about this before, but the fact that you've got the Hebrew, never mind the Egyptian, you know, symbols as well, it just actually makes, well, I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah.
But one thing I also didn't know is that you don't actually equate giants as Hebrew, or you don't. We've always just said giants, and we've never really given them an authenticity or a bloodline or you know a heritage. We just say giants, don't we? But you've opened the door that, wow, I can see the points coming together. The giants that were in the Old Testament time migrating out to other parts, and I never thought of that before. Wow.
And I think you see kind of, you know, there's so much pre-Christian biblical, if this makes sense, biblical lore in European tradition. So you have, for example, Gog and Magog and these biblical giants who pop up, who were very old in Irish culture and British culture before kind of the Christianization of everything.
Well, Gog and Magog were in Irish, my family's culture, before the Christianization of the area. They were there long before.
And I think, oh my gosh.
You're in school, it's okay.
Yeah, you know, this school never sleeps. You know, I get out at 2:20. School's supposed to end. Nobody's supposed to be here, but we have marching band, we have track and field.
Oh, don't worry about it. You know,
after school, yes. This you know, it's a great thing because this school, I'm gonna give props to it. They do so much for the community, and you know, they make it. This is basically in many ways the center of
that's lovely. There's no issues with it. Anyway, back to.
Sorry.
Yes, no.
I think that, you know, those traditions that you get are themselves markers, evidence of this migration of these giants from this land. So they get persecuted by the Babylonians. They get persecuted by the Romans. They keep moving. So you're moving west. So you're moving through Europe. You get to Britain. What's after Britain? What's after England? You have to cross the Atlantic. And that's what they do. And then they come to North America. So I think all of those stories, all those traditions are of these ancient Semitic giants. And I don't think, you know, I've always found it fascinating that, you have the Old Testament before Christianity in Europe, very clearly. Where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could, if we come out of comparative religions, we went back to other scriptures, they were on the earth then. However, we're going to hold it on that because, you know, when they say take the Bible as gospel and that, okay, well, fine. However, I've said this before, when I was at school and we used to have this lesson called religious education, whenever we would question who were these giants, like David and Goliath, we were all taught about, well, where did, but we were told, no, that's not, I mean, and it was always no, that anything like that. So I'm going to ask you, Adam, from your truth, from, you know, so far, and obviously truths change, who were the giants? Were they angelic beings? Were they the creator gods? Were they, who were these beings?
Yeah. I've always assigned kind of a human, superhuman designation to them. I think that they were much more powerful and stronger and more spiritually connected, for better or worse, than we are today. And I certainly think that for the ancients, they would have been considered gods. I think in many ways they were. So, for example, the Sumerian Giants, they were considered gods by the Sumerian people. So I definitely think that. I think some of these guys, just like Josephus does, were identified, and in fact were. I actually agree with you, Gloria. I'm not one, I guess it's because I love Greco-Roman mythology so much in the Greco-Roman world. I don't think these figures were fictional. I think Achilles existed. I think Heracles existed. I think that Odysseus existed. I mean, if you're reading Homer, you know, he never doubts. He's not making this up. He's not saying, you know, that's just fantasy. And he says clearly these guys once existed. They were stronger. They were better, and in some ways, and in other ways not so, but in some ways more noble than we were. So I think that all of those guys. And you get traditions about all of them being taller than ordinary stature. I mean, look at Ajax in the Trojan War also.
Yeah,
he is specifically a giant.
But what that raises for me, you've mentioned something which in the PowerPoint, obviously, you know, the guy who started the Smithsonian Museum and the, you know, obviously the hatred, white supremacists, blah, 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 to Native American Indians. However, I've got that. But these giants were all over the world, and all over the world, even in Europe or UK, Ireland, it was suppressed. So it had nothing to do with Native American. So what I'm coming to now, there's a bigger picture here. Why would let's just say the three Abrahamic religions, the three for now, why would they suppress a history about the giants? But they're really quite happy to tell us about the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on there. I think that if you look at the most esoteric books in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they all talk about these giant beings. Enoch, for example, the book of Enoch, who have these spiritual powers. And they pass on these spiritual powers to individuals. And I remember on my very first podcast, I mentioned this, and I'll mention it here. That is kind of the notion that you can have a direct spiritual relationship with something, or that can be passed down to you without the intermediary of a priest or an imam or a pastor, is something that is dangerous. And I say that, I preface that as saying, you know, I'm an evangelical Christian, but in answer to your question, you know, when you read the book of Enoch, there's no such thing as a priesthood. There's no such thing as church ritual and liturgy and sacraments and stuff like that. You can have, you can obtain this knowledge from whoever these watchers are, these giant beings are, and you can have your own relationship with the divine through them. You don't need all of these intermediaries. I think that is a very dangerous idea for organized religion, and I think that is exactly why you have, you know, so when you bring up, I did the same thing, you know, I went to Christian school. When you bring up the idea of giants, they either just say, you know, they're demons, or don't think about that. Let's turn to the story of Jesus.
Exactly, it's diverted. I mean, obviously this is your area of expertise, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask you. When we would talk the story of David and Goliath, does the Bible speak what tribe or who Goliath was? Because they named him Goliath.
Yeah, he is from the Philistines. Actually, you know what? He is called a Philistine, but the biblical text is actually a little bit ambiguous. It's not sure whether he fights, but we know he fights for the Philistines. But whether he's a Philistine himself, we're not sure. David refers to him as an uncircumcised Philistine, just as kind of an insult. But the text doesn't actually say that he's a Philistine. It just says that he's fighting for the Philistines. So we're not sure where he exactly, where he necessarily comes from. But we know in that region, there's a place, it's mentioned in the book of Joshua, called the Valley of the Giants, in Israel, Palestine. So when the Israelites are leaving Egypt and going into the promised land, and Joshua brings them to the promised land, they encounter this Valley of the Giants. And they not only would they have encountered it, but the Philistines would have encountered this Valley of the Giants as well.
Were these giants the same ones? Obviously, you know, they're our ancestors, by the way. Would these giants be the ones mentioned that came down into earth and mated with humans?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting, Gloria, because they're called the Valley of Giants are called the Rephaim and the Anakim.
Yeah.
You get the Rephaim and the Anakim mentioned in Genesis 6 as part of this group of giants that come down and mate with the children of men. Now, here's the funny thing. Those giants are supposed to have died out in the flood. So when Noah when there's a flood with Noah, if the flood destroyed the entire earth, those giants should have been wiped out. But lo and behold, thousands of years later, when Moses comes into the promised land, and when Joshua comes to the promised land, they see these Anakim and these Rephaim again. So they did not all die out. So yes, I think there's a deliberate connection there. So they are descended from this primordial group of giants.
Okay. Would you, I mean, you know, I have no issues saying, I mean, I'm going to have to use the word hybrid. I'm going to have to, because me and you are in an open discussion. It doesn't matter if we're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. We're discussing our history. And the whole point is we've been lied to. And so we're deconstructing the way that we can do it and the best way we can do it. But I look, for me, you know, I keep thinking, well, the giants, they couldn't have been totally human. It's okay.
Yep, just watching. Just talking to one of my friends. Yes.
The giants couldn't have been 100% human, Homo sapien sapien. No, they're a hybrid of something, are they not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What do you think they're a hybrid of?
I do not, you know, I think that they're definitely not like us.
Yeah.
So have a good weekend. Yeah, they're definitely not like us. They and I think, you know, Andrew Collins and my friend Greg Little talk about this. The Denisovans, for example, they had different DNA than us. So where does that come from?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
I mean, it's open. Come on, Anne. It's open. You know where I want to take this, because
yes, I know. I definitely know.
Where I want to. I mean, and I really don't mind. You just know it's other than Homo sapiens sapien.
Yeah.
You know.
Definitely.
So on this planet, there was other than Homo sapiens sapien, right? And even the Sumerian tablets go all the way back. They all talk of this. So there's not an issue no more. But however, we are the descendants from these giants.
Yeah,
we are. So that says a lot about us as well, does it not?
Yes, yes.
Do you, how I want to word this very carefully. I mean, for example, I say now that I think Jesus was really, in quotes, a hybrid, because he was 50% not of the earth.
Yeah.
50% Mary the mother. Do you see what I'm saying?
It's
a normal thing at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, you know, I've mentioned this, especially in the Gospel of John. Jesus keeps saying, I'm not of this world. You know, I'm from basically another planet.
Yes.
Basically, literally, he says that, cosmos in the Greek. And you see this with Noah and Enoch. They're all part of these kind of hybrid births with these giants.
Yes.
So I don't know if the giants themselves are supernatural. Clearly, the biblical authors, I mean, you look at Enoch, they equate them with the angels.
Yes.
Even the Nephilim, that gets translated as Akalos in Greek as angels. So there's definitely something going on there. I think they had a deep connection with the supernatural.
Yeah.
And that they passed on some of that lineage by blood onto
the DNA bloodlines. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and can you look at it, if humanity was taught what you're teaching and this discussion was done, you would start to realize that, you know, like we all, as we grow up, we all discard all religions. I'm not of any religion. I believe in a source, a God. I don't have an issue with it. I have a belief at the moment, or truth. There are angelic energies. I only label them angelic because I have no idea what they are, but they're very high vibrational. But all of the Abrahamic religions and other scriptures talk about these beings that interacted with humans. Now they're spiritual, as you stated, so maybe they're closer to the source.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they're closer to whatever the source is than we were, and that's why they were more spiritually connected with the world.
Absolutely, they knew who they were. So
we're on a very low vibration, unfortunately. I think that's changing now, like you said.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Yeah,
that's where I'm going. So then, if I go back to my question earlier on, why? Because it wasn't just the Native American giants. Why, you know, everywhere. And it was Christianity that, you know, slaughtered billions. Now that makes sense, because if you was allowed to go into and be educated on the history of the giants, that really they were like hybrids. Yeah, they were spiritually closer to source, and we're the ancestors. And Jesus even says, the kingdom of heaven is within, within. It even said multiple times, you are all gods. You're all gods.
If you look at, you know, the Gnostic literature, which is my favorite, so the Gnostic Gospels, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, all those Gospels written by women that didn't make it into the Bible. There's no priest or sacrament or ritual. It's all this knowledge, this spirituality that you obtain, and you have a direct relation. Yes.
So then that makes you think, well, that would, for me, it's a theory, guys. Don't shoot me. It makes you think, well, that would be a really good reason for them to suppress the giants when they wouldn't suppress the dinosaurs, which were bigger than
well, dinosaurs aren't that big of a threat to that mindset.
No, they're not a threat.
You can have dinosaurs.
Because people would then realize, well, I'm greater than this slave being that I've been told. I don't need to go to a building and to pay money or to ask for forgiveness. You know, I can go direct to source. I have to say, when I was younger, and all the way through, even when I tried every religion I could think of on my journey, I always kept saying, why do I need to go through somebody? If God is within me, I can go direct. And that's always been with me. I can go direct. I couldn't understand an intermediary. But also, when I did study, you know, the words of Jesus and all the other, you know, I've studied all the other literatures that were not included in the Bible by, you know, the Council of Nicaea, whatever they're called. Jesus never said once anything about intermediate or anything at all.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
He never said nothing. If you go on what he said, it is totally different to what we're actually seeing in the three Abrahamic religions today.
Yeah.
Does that mean, am I wrong? That's just my interpretation.
No, I think, you know, a lot of what has emerged is people trying to, you know, kind of understand Jesus' sayings, but, you know, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
So
we are the gods. We are the gods. It's all like, you know, because I one part always stuck with me when they said to him, "You're blasphemous and you call yourself a god," and he said,
"Is in the scriptures I say you are God."
Yeah. And he also says, "I was before Abraham, their father. I was before Abraham," which, if you listen to that, well, hello. You're before Abraham. So that was an inclination there as well. So I get that.
I think I want to piggyback on that because you know, I think that's one of my favorite verses. Before Abraham, I am. So
yes.
Jesus is saying there, you know, there's a spiritual dimension to me that existed way before then. And I normally don't bring this into the subject, but I'll talk a little bit about race. I think another reason that, you know, this is such a dangerous idea if we see ourselves as spiritual beings
Yes.
connected to a source,
Yes.
and I'll quote one of my favorite philosophers, Yoda from Star Wars. He says, "Luminous beings we are, not this crude matter."
Yeah.
And our physical appearance, my blackness, your whiteness,
Yeah.
whatever, that doesn't matter anymore.
No.
None of that matters.
No.
And that's a dangerous idea, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who profit off of division and strife on
Absolutely.
both sides.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's like it's always been there right in front of our eyes, but we never saw it. We never saw what's always been there, whether it's in scriptures, whether it's in carvings. You know, I'm still running in my head about the old Hebrew language, all the way out in America, and I'm thinking, wow. And it just never, and actually looking at them carvings, I'm not it's not my field, but I do remember researching years ago about giants and what this country called pagans, and the symbology and the shapes and it was amazing. And people were saying, especially in the Irish, it was very similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Before even the hieroglyphs, the markings, all very similar. So really, for when the giants walked the earth, they were, no wonder they were called the gods, but however, they would have to be annihilated, would they not? They would have to be hidden, killed off, because it couldn't be allowed.
Yeah.
There's no way, and for one reason, religion.
Yeah. I think you have some. You have some Saint George and the Giant, or is it Sir Gawain and the Giant, or you have those traditions where you have these Christian knights killing these.
Absolutely. Now, yes, demonizing them. And I think I said to you on my podcast, the nursery rhyme, I don't know about in your country, but here we're taught fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be him alive, be him dead, I'll grind him up for my bread. The giants, we were told about, to fear the giants as small children, and we're going to eat you all. So they would, so you can see how Christianity demonized it. But now it's, obviously talking to you, and I'm really grateful because some clarity's coming. The reason why they were hidden. People talk all over on shows about, they're hiding them away. Yeah, but no one ever says why. You've got to deconstruct. Well, why would they do that? If this is true, let's find out why. But that makes so much sense to me, because they were connected to source, very similar to Jesus. So, I mean, obviously, had to go through that procedure with Jesus as well. They were connected to source, so they'd have to be annihilated. And then on the back of that, all the Gnostics or pagans following afterwards that still had that connection to the one source, they were burnt at stakes, they were called witches, they were called, to try and eradicate this
ancient knowledge, which I think comes directly from the giants.
Yes. And whoever the giants are, I think they're like hybrids of some description. And I think that's beautiful. And, you've got to add on to that, even if you look in, I remember in Christianity, teaching Christianity, and it's in Islam, and it's in Judaism as well, the three Abrahamic religions, is this creator created out of mud and clay and breathed his spirit in to life. So that, if you even just ponder on that with some discernment, well, that means the God is in me. That even that little bit would give it away.
Yeah.
However, I don't remember being taught that. Like you're really taught something. No. That was another thing that was avoided.
One of the shocking things, when I teach my college class on the Old Testament, a lot of my students are from Irish or Italian Catholic background, and I tell them about right at the beginning of the Old Testament, in the Genesis creation story, there's a phrase that God made humanity in God's image, Zelem Elohim. And Zelem, I try to tell them that word in Hebrew is a direct, kind of a physical copy of the source, whatever that source is. So a king used to make a zelum in the ancient world, which was a statue, very highly decorated. I would call it an automata, that looked exactly like him. And it was supposed to represent his presence in a particular place. So if a king couldn't be someplace, the automata, the zelum, would stay there for him, would be in that place, and that will represent his presence. So I think that's and I tell my students this because the idea is that we in some way represent the presence of God on earth being made in the zelum Elohim. That's always kind of a shocking idea to them.
Well, I mean, to me is, if someone teaches you, you do realize, you're a spark of God, you're of God, that's just a joyous, wow, thank God for that, excuse the pun. I can't see anything wrong with it, but obviously when you've got like the polarities on this 3D experience, so you've got to have the opposition, the pull and push. I want to, before I move on, because I want to touch something else, but before I do, I want to go back in and ask you, do you think these giants that walked amongst the earth and more likely are still here, were they the Elohim?
Well, I think that in some ways they were. I mean, in the Sumerian text, the Sumerian tablets, they are equated with the gods. So Zechariah talks about this, the Anunnaki, the shining ones. So they're equated with them. And I think that in some of the biblical tradition, what is quote unquote understood as God might be a race memory of a giant. So I mentioned this before, Von Daniken talks about this. So you have God with a capital G. But you also have these other beings that oftentimes, at least in the ancient mind, their powers, their abilities, their stature is going to make them Elohim in their view. So I think the term Elohim definitely in some places in the Bible is referring to these giants.
Obviously there could have been, like we have different tribes and civilizations in this polarity. It could be that they had different as well. Different, labels. I don't know. I'm just exploring this because when I think about what's happening spiritually now, what everyone's calling an awakening and ascension, basically what's happening, that was my segue into there, is what the giants were, the connection to source that had to be oppressed and hidden. Humanity now, billions, are waking up to realizing who they are. They're saying, I am a spiritual being having a human experience.
And I think for so long, people have just got, especially in the West, we have become so materialistic. We think that it's only what we can touch has any value. And that has really been proven just to be a dead system. And a lot of people are, I think, correctly kind of breaking away from that and saying, and seeing correctly that there is much more. So, and I think a lot of the pushback, I think the tension that you're talking about comes from this materialistic world view that we've had in the West for at least the past 100, 150 years, versus this older, this primitive and more, in my opinion, just going to say it, more accurate spiritual view of the world.
Well, where I'm coming from, I'm seeing a polarity. I'm seeing a parallel here. We've just discussed these beings we call the giants or the Elohim, and why they were suppressed, why they were hidden, because they were connected to source. They can be hybrid. And then on the other hand, now, thousands of years later, in the now, 2021, we've got billions of people in humanity awakening for whatever reason to start saying, I am connected to source. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And we can now see the oppressors doing their utmost to crush them down, put them in fear, they, don't want them to wake up. Does that, can you see?
I agree with you. Everything is fear. And I think, going back, you talked about what a positive idea this is, to understand oneself as being the presence, to be the manifestation of God.
Yeah.
But, positivity, a lot of times, sadly, doesn't sell. Fear does. If fear of going to hell, fear of persecution, fear and stuff.
Billions waking up now, just even to the fact I'm a spiritual being.
Yeah.
Just like that. Yeah. They're getting it. Well, that now has to be oppressed quickly. It's like deja vu. It's the beginning and this is the end. But they're trying to put fear, control. Yeah. Don't wake up. I mean, it's too late, guys. It's already over. It's too late. It's done. But can you see what I'm seeing?
Absolutely, yes. And I think history repeats itself.
And this is the one where it's done. Yeah. You can't win this one. Yeah. And it gives you a better understanding of what's going on. And you know what? If someone is pushing you to say, you know what, you're not that spiritual being. You're not. You're a slave. You're an idiot. You're stupid. You're just going to do this. Get up at 9. Don't do nothing. That's going to.
I think people are starting to see how empty, it is.
Yes. That's going to ignite them to wake up more.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see what's happening, and I always say the gods are back, and I say that, and I say it with liturgy. We are the gods. The gods are back. And now you've put it into context for me, what I've been saying, and I keep saying, the Elohim are here. The Elohim are here, and the gods are back. And it's just a spiritual thing. But now you've explained that to me, it makes perfect sense. And I always say, with source, no ego of any Homo sapiens sapien or ET or anybody can overpower the source. It's consciousness. It is, and it is in them as well. So there is no fear. There's nothing to worry about. But it does make sense to me. It's joyous to think we did it. We come in. We were oppressed. We went through to experience all the polarities and to know I am that I am, to know thyself. And then ultimately, no matter what you do to the Homo sapiens sapien, nothing will touch it. Nothing will touch it. When it's time to self-realization, and that's what's happening.
It's going to happen. Yeah,
it's going to happen. I say awakening because it's a common, a word at the moment. But from my truth, it's self-realization. I am that. I'm either a spark of God. I am God. I'm a child of God.
It's the old knowledge that was always there. So it's not that you're discovering something new.
No, it's always been there. Yeah. And you've, and through your PowerPoint and what we spoke about, so you've explained the giants were aware of this. They were Absolutely. The gods that had this, and they had to be suppressed. So now all of the gods are waking up on planet Earth. And so they're going to have to be controlled, suppressed, and it's going to keep coming, but it's too late. It's done. It's done. It's obvious it's done. Yeah. I mean, because not only are beings saying, they're towing the line for a while, maybe one year, and they're towing it a bit, and then they go, enough. They can see it. I'm more than that. Yeah. I need to live as a human being and experience life. Yeah. That's what's coming out now.
There was an article that I was reading, more people are just, quitting their jobs, they're just their 9-to-5 slave jobs. I'm just going to put it out there.
Yeah. And no matter what, they're quitting their jobs. Yeah. And they're saying, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. And they go, bye. Or they say, no, you don't have to do it. Come back. That's what's happening now. Yeah. I know in America you had airline pilots. They said you have to go and do that, and they said no, bye. They said no, you don't have to do that no more. So you can see what's happening, because Homo sapiens sapien is starting, I believe, to take back their power, their right to exist, to be who they are. And what the experience of, let's say, the experience of Homo sapiens sapiens being to go from the source through a journey, multiple timelines. You can call it past lives. I don't call it past lives. I call it timelines, because there's only one source, one consciousness that experiences all things at all times, all places, eternally. So multiple, and it's come back, and people say it's the golden age. You can call it whatever you want. It's done. They're back, and it's back. It's self-realization. And through self-realization, then that literally shatters the illusion, and what is hidden will be revealed. This is hidden history, what you're speaking of. Does that resonate with you?
That resonates very strongly. That resonates very strongly. And, you know, if we get back to this, you know, the ancient spirituality that...
No, if we are doing it. We're doing it.
Yes. I think we'll have, you know, a much better world. Like going back to the giants. So I've always said that the giants in Genesis 6, they go back to a civilization, a lost civilization, unknown civilization. If I had to identify it, I would identify it as Atlantis. And, you know, before it became corrupted with the materialism, you know, it was a society of peace, and the technology that they used was cleaner, was better than anything that we had now. So we desperately need to get back to that, and we're getting back to it slowly but surely.
Yeah, we are that's an absolute definite. And what I'm finding, every individual Homo sapiens sapien now has a choice. It's a choice, and whatever choice you make, that's the timeline you're going to experience. That's where it's going. I mean, you can take that statement out of all of the scriptures. You know, it's all about choice. It's your choice, what you choose to experience. Me, I choose to experience the direct source. I've always experienced the direct source, and why would you not? Because, you know, of the experience of the unconditional love, and the freedom of it. You know, it doesn't matter what you do, because you know who you are, you know what's going on, and you're going through, you know, I don't know, I am that I am created a social experiment to experience all things, and that is freedom. Who's going to listen to an oppressor with that? You know, can you imagine it? And I know a lot.
I think that's exactly why things are happening the way they are right now.
Because if I will say, if a spark of the source, because I'm being sensitive with my language here. So say, for example, I'm a spark of the source. I'm 50%, okay, of the source, and 50% physical matter, which is made from the source. It's very hard for me to say this, because it's all consciousness. It's all created by the source. But I am connected to you, and even, I'm sorry, the arseholes out there. I'm connected because there's one source. If I am that I am goes into self-realization anywhere, it follows. There's no such thing. It's illogical to think that beings will be left behind, because it's one source that's in all beings. Does that make sense to you?
And we're all connected. So the things that separate us,
even the arseholes. And I've said to people, don't ever say that person is not going to get this, because I have seen people that I never thought would awaken to their spiritualization of themselves, and all of a sudden, so don't ever think, oh, that's never going to wake up. You know, no, they're still source as well. They're still source. So you be careful in what you're trying to create there between you. I want to ask you before we it's so fascinating. You know me, I'll chat for England with you. It's just too fast. We're going to do it again.
Definitely. We're
going to do it again in the new year and go deep into something.
Yes.
At the moment, I'm hearing from my shows and groups and other people, and I've got to ask this, I am not religious of any dogma. I have no issue with the man Jesus, whether he existed or didn't exist. There's an energy called Christ consciousness that exists. That's my truth, okay? So when I say Christ consciousness, I don't mean the religion of Christianity or anything like that. Over the recently, over a year or so, but I'm hearing it from many others now, of this energy coming in, and we're all hearing very similar. One, we're hearing Christ consciousness. It's not what you think it is. It's not religion, but it's the source. It doesn't, it's not the image of Jesus, for example, but also the Elohim. And myself included is becoming aware, and many others, we are the Elohim. So I don't know if we're hearing we are the Elohim, that we are the Elohim, or another being, conscious being is the Elohim. Does that make sense to you?
It does. You know, it's really interesting. Going to switch gears just a tiny bit about the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah.
And how that has increased exponentially recently.
Yes.
And I think that we are definitely seeing a type of spiritual shift that is taking place. And the powers that be are trying to suppress it, like you said, as much as they can. But I think that I think that this is going on all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, because when I said, you know, if we take it back, the giants were these, I'd say, hybrids. It's an easy way for us in the 21st century to understand people in this field. Hybrids, 50 of 1%, 50% and 50% Homo sapien. These were spiritual beings connected to source. You didn't need to go anywhere. Yeah. That was it. And that was oppressed. Evolution of the experience, self-realization comes up, and at the same time that the whole of the earth is coming into self-realization, all at different levels. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. You're right. The word I always use is exponential. The contact with other dimensional beings.
Yeah, and UFO, you know, like UFO, I said, angels, aliens, they're all the same to me.
All the same thing. It's all one thing for me. It's paranormal. It's like it's all coming in together. And that's where I use the word, and please listen carefully. I call it a spiritual apocalypse, not a physical.
Yeah.
A spiritual apocalypse. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I teach a little bit about biblical apocalypses in my Old Testament class. And one thing I try to tell students is that the term apocalypse in its original and pure form is not this like Terminator 2 nuclear holocaust disaster and everybody suffering and the Antichrist comes and all that stuff. But it means a transition from one period of time to a better period of time. That's what apocalypse means if you look at Daniel and other books. So a transition in time, not the end of the world, not the end of existence, not a crappy existence, but a better existence.
Yeah. And that's why I say spiritual, because to me, I always call it the spiritual apocalypse. And there is some what we call biblical references, and don't deny it, because you need, if you're going to research this, you cannot only research what suits you. I've had to research comparative religions, all of it, things like alternatives and things like but I've had to. I need to get the whole picture, and then I go back and I go, I never saw it that way. But I can now take transfer as an analogy some of the biblical scriptures, Egyptian and all the rest of them, into what is happening now. And to me, it's a spiritual apocalypse. Individual beings are waking up into having a self-realization. They're just like the giants or the gods or the Elohim. They're realizing they're connected to source direct. If you are connected to source direct, no one can control you. It's not going. And the more that you recognize that, you become more loving, more empathic, more kind, and more patient. And you're the 50%. I talk about the juxtaposition. So you've got Gloria, the identity, and you've got consciousness that is behind that. That's well, the other consciousness in the juxtaposition, the source, that starts to permeate the rest of the identity, and it permeates and it takes away all the egotic belief systems, concepts. I'm better than you. Why are you black? You should be white. It just dissolves it.
Yeah.
And the source comes through every individual being. And I'm seeing groups around the world coming together in online communities. And you know what? Even if they took down the internet, it's too late. It's done.
It would happen. It still happens.
Find a way to get to each other. Yeah, it's done. We're in the most, sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we are in the most, for me, the most important place of the history of this experience. And that's now. We're there. The gods are with us. We are the gods. It's trying to get that into context. Yeah. And you know what? I have no issue if the gods materialize, whether they are the ET, they could be the ET or the Elohim, and it doesn't really matter, because you can only see this isn't negative, because self-realization just brings unconditional love. How can you say a contact with the Elohim or an ET that brings and allows your physical being, and there's billions of us now, to experience this source of unconditional love? How can you call that a demon?
Yeah.
Only a demon can take you to dark. If you want to go down the demon road, go follow it. That's what you experience.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. But so no, how can you say that's, because I'm hearing now the backlash because of the awakening, they're demons, they're demonic. Well, how can they be demonic?
I've never subscribed to that. You know, I've had a couple of, UFO encounters myself, very personal experiences. Yeah. I actually have not seen an alien myself, but I have seen their vessels and stuff. And it's interesting. There was a famous ufologist who said, if these guys are demons, and it's kind of odd because they've never done anything but show kindness to me. Yeah. And on a similar vein, I would say that was what my experiences were like too. So I grew up in a Baptist church. There was I was raised Baptist before I joined a Latter-day Saint tradition, and there was talk of demons and everything, and that's not when the description of these beings that we get in ancient literature and descriptions of the UFOs now, that doesn't really correspond to demon.
I agree with you. And then as this has happened, the self-realization has happened, and then they come out with new things all the time. And I'm hearing now, oh, we're like a farm for them. They've been genetically modifying us. What the fuck are you talking about? Go back to the giants. Go back to Jesus, Mary. There's
been a lot of genetic modification.
It's a lot of what's been going on. We're not special for some reason. This era of Homo sapiens sapien, the egos are so big that they think they're so.
It's out of the roof. We think we're the pinnacle of civilization. We think we're
absolutely
the greatest thing that ever existed.
I mean,
there's no humility, and this is why we don't
zero humility.
We don't learn from the lessons of the past, and we're doomed to repeat ourselves if we don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, we won't on that timeline because it's already done. But, you look at that and you say, one, if they wanted to wipe us out, they've had eons to do it. They never did. Mm-hmm. And when they've tried everything else, they're going to invade us. I said, well, we see them in the sky all the time and they don't invade. Come on. And then they go, well, no, they're going to take over the world. They've been doing this. And I'm saying, well, they've always been here. We are them. They are us.
The Watchers were them. And that was thousands of years, tens of thousands of years
exactly. Ago. We are them. They are us. And, and if you even go from non-duality, self-realization, of course, they're us. But so it's about, they're at the moment, so many new things are coming out, and I laugh. I think you can throw everything you got at this, but it's not going to stop what's about to occur. What that is, who knows? All I know is it's done. I have no idea. I haven't got the hotline to the source yet, but it's a freedom. It's that freedom, I think, is what people are experiencing now. The freedom of self-realization, that they're more than the slave, that told what to eat, what to do, where to go. Their food is genetically modified with, I mean, you even got arsenic in foods and everything. And no more. People are now starting to change their diets.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Or
you
farm themselves. They were putting
yes,
stuff on the back of their yards.
I mean, I go organic the best I can. It's very expensive in the UK, organic.
It's expensive here too.
Yeah, and I'm trying my best, but you know, my intention is to, so we're all trying.
Yeah.
For no one made a conscious decision to do this. No identity did. It's the other 50% in there that's coming through.
Yeah. And we need to do things a different way. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I will add to this before we close, because you know I'm a rebel. They say the return of Christ consciousness. Well, hell yeah, in all of us. It's returning. Not a man is returning. The source is returning through self-realization. So Christ consciousness is a frequency of energy, which is just unconditional love source. Yeah. And we have to give it labels because we're playing the role of him. But if you're saying it's the return of Christ consciousness, well, obviously, because billions of Homo sapiens, the 50% that has the source, I'm a spiritual being, call it Christ consciousness, call it whatever you want, is self-realizing, I'm back, the gods have returned. There's your return.
Yeah, getting off the low frequency.
Yeah, that's how I see it. That it's just, and you go, God, that's so simple, because that's just what's happened through awakened beings realizing who they're. So you can still study religions, you can still talk about, you can still have your belief systems. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're aware of who you are, you can still play the role of everything you want to play, but with the freedom and no fear. We are the gods. We have returned. I love that. It makes me giggle. And I've never seen a giant skeleton. I'd love to see one, but I've never physically seen one. Have you seen one?
I have never physically seen one. I know there's some museums in Peru and stuff that have them. Yeah. I've never actually seen one. I would love to see one.
I would just, just out of curiosity, but do you know what, Adam, this has been absolutely fantastic.
This is a wonderful conversation. I loved every minute of it.
And me too. And in the new year, we're going to do another one or something else.
Yes, we have to do it.
I love deconstructing, and we've got a hidden history, and it's a time that we really start critically looking at our history in any way we can, and try and perceive it with different eyes on the back of like what we discussed today. And we may not resonate with each other on all things, we agree to disagree, but we're both on a journey to find the truth. Absolutely. That's what we're on. I think it's just fantastic talking to you. I love it. Thank you for the presentation. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
God, you're welcome. And I may get some Latin lessons off you, I think. Can you speak Latin?
I can speak Latin, yes.
Go on, just give us, go on, say something.
Ego sum, Magister Stokes, Decalogue, Ludo, Penn's Grove, cum discipulos. Oh gosh.
No, don't. I put you on the spot.
I'm Mr. Stokes. I teach at Penn's Grove High School with my students. Let me see. Ego habeo duo filios et femina mea est Daphne. So I have two sons, and my
wow,
my wife is named Daphne. Yes.
Cool. Is this the language that the likes of Plato and Aristotle?
They would have spoken ancient Greek. My Greek's a little rusty. I do know New Testament Greek. I know that very well. But Cicero, Caesar, Mark Antony, Emperor Claudius, they all would have spoken Latin.
Wow. Wow, I think that's cool. I can only speak, I used to speak Arabic years ago. And I can't, I used to go into the markets, and they used to say I had baby Arabic, and I could, I knew about money. But then I studied some surahs of the Quran. I could recite them in Arabic. I could still recite them in Arabic now.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful language. I fell in love with the beautiful language and the way it was, especially Quranic Arabic.
Yeah.
That's the one I learned to recite the surahs in the language, and I know what they mean as I'm reciting, which is just, I don't know how, because my brain's all fuzzy, but I know what I'm saying. But I was very, very interested in Latin years ago, God, decades ago, and because I studied obviously Aristotle, Plato, all the classics. I studied all the works.
Yeah.
You know, the analogy of the cave and all that. I was going on. I thought I'd love to speak Latin, or I'd love to speak like the Greek gods, and because I find there's such richness in culture in the language.
Whenever you read a text, you know, whether it's the Bible or you know, one of my favorite Latin text is the Aeneid, followed by Cicero. But I'm a very big fan of Hera or Juno in the Greco-Roman pantheon. So when she speaks in Latin, it's kind of like, you know, when you're able to read that, it's kind of like you're hearing her talk in her original language. So,
yeah, I mean, it's just,
sense.
And then when you hear a language that was like our ancestors spoke tens of thousands of years ago, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And also there was another one, Aramaic. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah, many years ago, there was, I can't recall the person, and they could speak this, and I said, I would love to speak the language of that time when this man Jesus walked.
Yeah, because he just spoke Aramaic. Yep.
Yeah, Aramaic. And I said, and then I can't remember the person. It's when I was doing my studies, and they could speak Aramaic. I said, that is so big. And when you hear it, because I go on vibration, it's like art to me, like Arabic is. Quranic Arabic is like art.
Yeah.
There's something in it you could, and they do sing it in the Ardan sings it. But when it's like music, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah. Hebrew cantilated, like the Torah scroll is similar to it. Yes, yes.
Wow.
But the Quranic passages, they're I don't know Arabic, but I have a lot of Muslim friends, and so when I was in college, you know, they would pray 3 times, and I would hear some of the chanting. Absolutely gorgeous.
I mean, when you hear the Adhan call, I mean, if you get a good singer, it's just so, it's actually angelic.
Yeah.
The vibration hits the back of your spine.
Yeah.
It hits you. So, and in many languages, but you're very fortunate to speak them languages. But I've digressed. It's my show. I can do what I want. Thank you so much. I'm going to get you back in the new year. We'll do something else on something else.
Sounds great, Gloria.
It was fantastic. And to my guests, to my audience, thank you for watching Open Minds. Please like and share and subscribe. I say it again, it's not about Gloria. It's about all my guests that come on to get this information out there. If something resonates with you, take it, go research it, or get hold of him, not me. I'm not the expert. And if it doesn't, just put it to one side. I hear a lot from my guests that doesn't resonate with me. Am I bothered? No, I put it to one side. Who knows? One day it may resonate. Stop judging, stop being biased, and let's all stop thinking we know it all. None of us know anything. We're all on this journey, and we need to enjoy it. And now's the time to do so. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, Gloria, for having me. It's a pleasure, as always.
All right. Bye, everybody. Till next time.
Take care.